Hi, and welcome to Helping People Perform, the podcast that gives you fascinating insights into those people whose chosen vocation is to help others perform at their best. From consultants to teachers, sports coaches to financial advisors, all of my guests share a passion for getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organisations. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to another episode of the Helping People Perform podcast. I'm really excited for this session today because this is somebody who got me into the world of podcasting and was the first podcast that I got to go on as a guest. So it's fantastic to have him as a guest on our show. So welcome to Jens Heitland.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolute pleasure, mate. Absolute pleasure. So, Jens, you describe yourself as a serial entrepreneur. You've got 3 companies, I believe, in your midst, and you've got such an amazing experience and story behind you, and some real ambition that I think we're going to focus on later on, all around helping people perform through innovation and entrepreneurship, so and leadership development, all sorts of different topics that I'm sure we'll touch on today. So really excited to get in amongst how you help people perform. But I'd like to just start off with a little bit of that background story. You know, what's your background story? What have you done to get you to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long one, but I keep it short. I started working when I was 16 on construction sites, really going the way of, hey, I'm not good enough in school, which I truly wasn't.
Right.
I wasn't making the cut for going to the gymnasium, as they say in Germany.
Right.
So I started directly in education as an electrician, worked my way up in the construction industry, and then found a way out into a professional service industry, which was facility management, and worked then in one of the biggest European suppliers at that time, growing into it, and then was headhunted and hired from IKEA, where my real career, let's say, started. So I started in an IKEA store, and over a time of almost 12 years, worked my way up to be global head of innovation for the IKEA Centers business. So working worldwide with different entities in different countries. Was living until now in 6 countries. So you can imagine a lot of things, changes, and a lot of improvement. And then stepped out to build my own businesses, working with other companies, finding out how I can make my mark in this world, and really challenging myself as well to give back, and not just because of the money. So really figuring out how I can be like something for good in this world myself.
A lovely story and fantastic stuff there. But I mean, there's going to be a lot of our listeners really interested in that bit about global head of innovation for IKEA. I mean, that's already known as an innovative company. Well, certainly is in the UK anyway. So how did you find yourself getting into that role?
I mean, it started when I was working in the Russian organization. So I was head of sustainability for the Russian market. Was working with shopping centers, IKEA stores, and so on for IKEA. And there was one of the managers was saying, "Hey, we're doing an innovation lab. You're the guy. Like, we need a green guy in this." And I was like, "Of course, I'm in it. It sounds fun." And basically, within this innovation lab, there was the global CEO was part of this, a couple of other leaders from the organization. And in the end, it was about, hey, we have now done a year of exploration. We have done a lot of interesting things, but we haven't really done anything, which like a project or something really that moves the needle. And then there was the question, okay, who of you will take it on top of your normal job to run this thing now? A couple of projects, and yeah, if you know me, then you know who was first and saying, okay, I'm doing it. So I ended up being head of innovation and customer experience for the Russian market plus sustainability. Wow. And I was basically doing exploration projects, and all of that was on the radar of the global CEO. So he has seen what we're doing, and then I was basically asked a couple of years later, it's like, hey, how about implementing this globally, building a strategy, building an inclusive way of driving innovation into the business. And that's how I ended up moving from Russia to Sweden.
And so you've gone from Russia to Sweden. I know you've got your native Germany. Yeah. When I first met you, living in Spain, you're now in Holland. You know, is there any way you haven't been?
Not really. Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of white spots on the map still.
Right.
but specifically, of course, living, but even traveling.
Right. I'm sure you'll fill those in one day.
Yeah.
Uh, and so you've had that experience with IKEA, and then you've decided to make a move and to go off and do your own thing. I know you're a podcaster. You've got these different companies. You also are a lecturer at universities as well. So
Yeah.
what sort of other experiences have you got since leaving IKEA?
I mean, one part is, of course, when you work with innovation, and I've worked a lot with startups in the bigger corporate sense, you go out and you think you know everything, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like figuring out that being on your own as a solo entrepreneur in the beginning is not that easy because you are basically the chief accountant, the chief executive officer, and the person that is doing everything.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting way, and I really digged into that to say, okay, I will start completely new. I will rebrand myself from being the corporate guy to not being the corporate guy anymore.
Right.
So I went through a phase where I was just wearing hoodies on social media, and really, I met people at that time who didn't know me, and I'm not telling everyone my backstory,
Yeah.
who just have seen me as the young guy who is, yeah, he's the stupid guy. He's doing podcasts and he's on social media and doing fun stuff. So that was quite an interesting journey. But what I did, of course, running the business, helping still very large companies and really huge companies in the world on how they can innovate, how they can bring ways forward. I was not wearing a hoodie at that in that at least in that engagement. And then I was reaching out to universities on how I can give back. It was not about, for me, earning money. It was more about, hey, how can I contribute to educate young people in different ways? Because honestly, what I always hated in university and as well in school before, it's like a lot of theory.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I was always a practical guy. I was like, yeah, tell me more about how it really works, not about what is written in the book. So I was always arguing with the professors and the people who were doing the lectures, German. Um, and then I said, okay, I will try to do that in a different way. So I was ending up in lecturing at the Barcelona University when I was in Spain. I'm still doing it,
Right.
helping them as well with startups. So they have a startup incubator, basically an accelerator internally, where they help students to build their own startups. And when I moved to the Netherlands, I did the same. I reached out to Rotterdam University, Amsterdam University, and trying to figure out if there's anyone interested in my knowledge, again for free. And yeah, Amsterdam University said yes. Hey, let's figure it out. And now I'm lecturing. Next week, I will teach or lecture around startup investing
Right.
inside of the Amsterdam University. So it will be fun.
I can imagine.
Yeah,
It's a great experience for those involved. And I think that's it, because this podcast is all about those different angles of how people can help others perform.
yeah,
And I think just the whole topic of innovation is obviously a key one to you. But another one that I've experienced is how well you connect people. You've got your, you connect the dots newsletters, but
yeah,
also you
yeah,
setting up lots of networks. And it's a really interesting approach for how you can help others through just connecting different people. And what's your experience been in terms of connecting lots of different people? What value have you got out of it, and what have you seen for others?
yeah. So one of the topics I have found out through having a coach myself early on when I was working, for example, in IKEA, that it's kind of everyone has a tendency of what your superpower is. And I was digging deeper into what is my superpower, and what I found out that there's something which everyone has, where you're naturally good at, where you basically don't spend calories or energy on.
Right.
And for me, it was always connecting people in different ways.
Hmm.
In school, it was like, hey, let's get out for a beer and find a good drinking spot together. And now it's like uh, bringing business people, but as well personal friends together, and see what comes out of that.
Hmm.
And I do this basically in every situation I'm in, and everything what I'm doing. I'm doing it naturally now,
Hmm.
and it's fascinating when you bring someone like a Hollywood movie director who has won an Oscar, and nobody knows that he is that person and has that background, together with a student who is just getting started. And there's always something magic coming out if you put people together
Yeah.
who have never met, who come from different backgrounds and from different cultures. So That's really something I learn every time about that. I mean, you have been part of a couple of these exercises.
Indeed.
It's just interesting and fascinating when you meet people and bring them together without having the purpose of earning money with it. That's for me the most important thing in the beginning. I'm not setting these things up to earn money with it. It's more about seeing the fascinating things like, hey, these people have built a business together and I connected them like 5 years ago through this instant, and so that's just fascinating to see.
Yeah. And yeah, I can speak from experience in terms of some of the networks you've set us up and set up, and I've been involved with. I find just the different perspectives and the different people. I mean, we've been in a conversation earlier this evening where we've got someone from in AI, we've got someone in sort of construction and retail, malls and things like that, and then somebody who's more of the sort of professor type
Yeah.
looking at how the brain works, and just a conversation that comes together from that. You talk about a topic and something that's a challenge to somebody at the moment, and then you've got all these different perspectives, and everybody's game seems to just up a little bit, and it sparks off a load of ideas. So I love that aspect of what you do.
Yeah. What I love about that, I always take notes. So I have had from the conversation today, which was around an hour, I have 4 A4 pages of notes, which is there's so much value in that already.
Yeah, and which I think brings us on nicely to the main part of this, which is what are you doing now, and how are you looking to help people perform? Because I know you've got something. I mean, this podcast is going to come out at the beginning of October, but you've got something kicking off from the 1st of October, so this will be in the past when this comes out. But
Yes.
tell us about that, because it sounds like an amazing, challenging, exciting venture that you're going into.
Yeah, so that was boiling already over the last years. I always did smaller prototypes, testing different things of what is resonating with people, what is not resonating people, and a podcast is a great way of doing it because you feel what people like, what people listen to, and not. But as well, personally, I have had a couple of challenging moments in my career, in the history as well,
Mm.
and they almost always have been connected to bad leadership.
Right.
Bad leadership of myself, like me leading people not in the best way, but as well people that, let's say, haven't led me in the best way. And sometimes that meant I'm stepping out of the job and don't like that leadership anymore, don't want to work with that company anymore.
Yeah.
So what I was looking into is like, how do we solve the bigger problems in this world? And then we all know when we talk about innovation, the Kodak example, that there was a guy who has invented the digital photography, and Kodak at that time, the company when it comes to photography, didn't take it.
Yeah.
For me, the root cause of that is a leadership issue.
Right.
There was someone who is saying, no, we're not going to do this because I'm saying it. And that's basically over and over and over again. I interviewed, for example, one of the early employees of PayPal.
Right.
And he was pitching the source code of PayPal, basically what is behind of PayPal, inside of Citibank, which most people don't know.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to do it. It was too risky, and it's again a leadership issue. So I was looking into how do we solve this, and how can I use my understanding of this world and the network I'm building, this connecting power, superpower, to build something that enables us in the whole world to solve this problem. So what I'm basically starting on 1st of October is a startup that's focused on leadership education, and we want to provide leadership education for free for everyone in this world. And the goal, which I just said last week, is we want to reach 1 billion people by 2030.
Okay.
And it's really like, how do we figure this out? I have no idea yet, to be honest. I have, of course, a couple of ideas,
Yeah.
but I have not the solution. I have not the educational system that 100% works. I just believe in, if I'm using my connecting superpower, I will find the right people over time that get this going. And I'm just starting basically with a small team behind the scenes from 1st of October, and we just launch it and go.
Fantastic. I love this, the ambition of it all, and just the sort of what they call big, hairy, audacious goals. You know, it's this isn't going out and going, right, let's see if we can get 10 people, 100 people together. When you say everyone in the world, you really mean it, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, in the end, if we just see all the challenges we have in this world, and we talked a little bit about that before we started recording. If we just see climate change, which is a huge problem, we're not doing enough. And that's often leadership issues. Leadership when we look into nations, leadership when we look into countries, leadership when we look into organizations. And if we change leadership, we change the world. And that's really where I believe we need to tackle this, that leaders are changing that going forward. And most probably is, I have no idea yet, but we need to start with the young ones, the ones who are coming now, because they think differently. If we look into Gen Z, they have a different perspective than the two of us. They're starting their careers. So if we educate them, enabling them to be better leaders than we are, we can change the world. And of course, there will be 2 or 3 of us who are hopefully getting reached with that as well.
There's always got to be some benefit for everybody involved. But I mean, just as a social enterprise and a social project, that helping people perform through better leadership is only just going to up everybody's game,
Exactly.
isn't it? Really, yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Oh,
and that's why we call the startup Succeed,
right.
Because we believe you as an individual and or your company will succeed with better leadership.
Right.
And if we help you to educate yourself and or your company to focus on leadership more than you have ever done in the past, it's going to change. Right. And the performance will go up through the roof.
Yeah. Step change stuff, isn't it? It's changing that paradigm and making that available to everyone. And am I right in saying you're looking to make this available to everyone for free? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there will be, of course, paid opportunities, because we will not be able to do this completely without money.
Yep.
I would love to do it without money, but it's not going to work. Same like if you look into Facebook has reached, I don't know, a couple of billion people. It's not working on scale without money. So you need to put a couple of investments in, but there are smart ways in today's world where you don't need to charge the user for it.
Right. Yeah. And just having that a bit available to everyone so that they can tap into that worldwide knowledge of how leadership can help them perform and help their own teams perform as well.
Exactly.
Great. What an endeavor. It's a great one, and I'm sure there's going to be a few people listening to this who've either got some thoughts or want to hear more. So I do encourage them to first of all go and listen to the Jens Heitland show and the podcast. Episode 160, I think it might be, is an absolute top one. But yeah, you've been doing that for a while as well, and learned a lot and had those different perspectives from there. And I'm sure that's helped. I'm sure that's been a way in which you've helped to up your game. You say you take notes with all of these things. Do you use that for your own performance lift?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm organized and structured, but not too crazy. But I take notes for a lot of things. I don't look at all of them, but I know that for me it's sticking better into my brain if I take notes. Yeah. So I don't need to revisit things. Yeah. A lot of times at least. So that's one of the small tiny things I do to perform better in brain and so on.
Yeah. And so what other things do you do? How do you up your own performance?
I mean, a couple of things. What I've learned for myself is doing sport, which is basically freeing up my mind. Not so good at that anymore compared to before the pandemic, but still, going out for a run frees up your mind. And you will not believe it, but I'm an introvert. So I like to be alone, and it's always fascinating what ideas you get when you go out for a longer run.
Right.
And then I'm just using this to refuel myself and really getting upping my game, basically, with a little bit of me time, a little bit of exercise, getting the body moving to get the brain moving.
Yeah. Oh, and do you have you got anybody else that you reach out to? Do you have? You mentioned a coach earlier on in your career. Do you still reach out to coaches? Do you do that in an official manner? Do you do it more ad hoc? How does that work for you?
There are a couple of different levels. For sports, I have a coach which is based in the UK. So I'm part of a triathlon club basically and have a professional coach.
Nice.
Since a couple of years, he's helping me to perform when it comes to sport. Huge difference, I can tell you.
Right.
So I've done long distance triathlons, the Ironman distance,
Mm.
and huge difference if you have someone who knows exactly how it works and it's going into nutrition, how do you need to move, all the different details, which you would never be able to do alone.
Yeah.
Then, of course, I've had several coaches on the way, personal coaches, career coaches, who helped me in different situations. And an important part, what I learned for myself as well, having a mentor.
Right.
And I've had different mentors in the corporate world, which hasn't been at least for me, it was never set up and hey, this is officially your mentor. It was naturally growing into that. And since I think 3 years when I started my own business, and one of the startups I kind of tested was reverse mentorship. So I have basically a couple of young people I'm connected to.
Yeah.
It's not officially coaching or mentoring, but it's basically just talking with them, figuring out how they think will give you a completely different perspective. So,
Right.
and then of course, due to the fact that I'm connecting a lot of people, like the conversation we have been on today,
Yeah.
this is basically not official coaching, but in a way it is as well, where you hear other people's opinion and then you can agree or disagree and take your feedback or not. So that helps a lot to get perspective, which is what it is about for me as well.
Yeah. And you touched on a particular thing there, which is going in as an entrepreneur, going in as a new business starter where you are alone. As you say, you're the CFO, the CEO, you also empty the bins and, and clean
Yeah.
the toilets and whatever else is needed at the time. But how do you go about, or how did you go about, how do you advise others to go about actually getting a mentor, getting that different perspectives from outside your organization? Because it's quite easy to become very insular in those cases, isn't it?
Yeah. The tricky thing, and someone more clever than I said that, I've read it somewhere, is basically there are a lot of people who are just not asking and not getting it.
Right.
And specifically when it comes to input, we are living in a time where you basically can reach out to everyone. If you truly want, let's say maybe the president of the United States is a little bit difficult, but if you truly want to reach, let's say Barack Obama, there is a way how you can reach him.
Mm.
It will take maybe 2 years, but you are able to. So for me, it's really about taking the step and asking.
Right.
I'm sometimes reaching out. A fun story. I was reaching out to the Spanish king when I was in a startup event in Spain because I was knowing that he was there.
Right.
You cannot reach out and you will definitely not get an appointment, but you can reach out and if you're lucky, you get an appointment. I didn't, but at least there was a chance.
Yeah. You put yourself in that situation where
Yeah, I
you
wanted
could
to
get
interview him on my podcast.
right. Oh, amazing. I think I just remember a known story. I think it was somebody from your own podcast as well, who was saying, reach out to me if you want, just putting out to the world. If anybody wants any support, reach out. Here's my phone number.
Yeah.
And so I did. I listened to it. I phoned up and said, yeah, you said, and sure enough, he was more than happy. And this is somebody far more successful, far more experienced than me. And we just had a great conversation.
Yeah.
And just putting yourself in those situations, the worst thing that could have happened is either not picked up the phone at all or said, no, thanks. Nah, this isn't it. But if you don't try, you don't get.
Exactly. And I think that's something which I can just specifically if you're an entrepreneur, it's about getting yourself out there, reach out to people. There's nothing better than a no. Because at least there's a no, and then for me it's always a no is the start of the conversation. But it's still there are so many possibilities to reach out to people who have the right knowledge you might not have, and connecting to them. It's not always about money if you do it smartly. If you just try to sell something, that's not going to work. But it's really if you're truly honest and say, hey, sorry, but I have no idea, would love to learn from you, you can reach out to anyone.
And I know because I've had it the other way around, believe it or not, people have actually asked my opinion at times. And I find it really valuable to my own performance.
Absolutely.
To be able to give that back and I think the way that your mind works or has to work in order to portray and communicate those experiences and those things, it actually cements things, gets you thinking in different directions. You go, oh, I did that, but maybe I should have gone different routes, so
Yeah.
you're actually helping your own performance when you're helping other people, aren't you?
100%. I'm, for example, mentoring startup founders or entrepreneurs who are basically stepping out of the corporate, basically me like 4 years ago.
Right.
And they're paying me for the service. It's fairly cheap, but it's quite interesting. Every time I coach them, and I have a year program for them,
Yeah.
with them, I'm learning something.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, I could have done that differently.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast on this topic as well was just to enlighten a lot of listeners as to all the different things and different directions you can go to help others perform, and how that actually helps you perform as well,
Yeah.
because it exposes you to these different scenarios. There are all sorts of different ways which you can make a living out of it. It's not always the most lucrative, but people do make good livings out of actually helping people through consulting, through mentoring, coaching, those sorts of things, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you can earn a lot of money with that.
Oh,
It
thanks.
takes a while. It
Yeah.
takes a while, but
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I think it's one of the often not used enough. So if you take corporate world,
Mm.
I was a corporate leader for a long time, and I've had different jobs on different levels in organization. Let's say, I've had enough money to spend money for a coach. I didn't do it,
Right.
and a lot of people didn't do it. Specifically, I have to say males,
Right.
because we believe we know everything. We know how the world works. But I think everyone would benefit from having a coach, from having someone to talk to. Is like, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Having a conversation on how can I increase my performance on different things.
Yeah.
It's just reaching out to someone and taking the step, because the investment, it's fairly small. Even if you pay, let's say, $10,000 or whatever, it's not a lot investment if you look into your lifetime.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I actually had a conversation this morning for somebody who's actually taken that leap, and it was around facilitation of an event.
Yeah.
And they looking in smallish companies, said, right, we're going to have a big retrospective of all the work we've done, and we're going to have somebody internally run this for us. And just that thought process, actually, maybe we could get somebody in from outside here and facilitate that process for us. And as you say, it's a small investment, but actually the value that business can have, and just having those internal people in this conversation as opposed to facilitating it, and a different perspective, and more of someone who's used to taking people through those processes, can just raise the bar on it.
Yeah, 100%. Specifically, if you take the smaller ones, I'm not a big fan of the big consulting companies, though that I've worked in one of them. Um, it's more about the small ones, like the small consultancy coaching companies that have, like, either it's a single person show, or it's like a 10 people show, even 20 people still. They have a different perspective, and they help you and help organizations to do things in a different way and give their input, give their reflection into that as well, because they have done it a couple of times in different ways, and that's always valuable.
Yeah.
A lot of organizations are trying to save the small money and then only take consultants when it comes to the big F-ups, where they're like, now we need to take one of the big fives in and change the whole organization.
Right. Yeah.
Rather than taking the small ones in, it's like, hey, let's take pieces of the business and fix that, where the small ones would be way better suited to do it.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Could talk about this for hours, but just moving on to the sort of the more quick fire questions. A couple of key things I want to ask you is, one, in terms of who you'd like to support. If you were to help one person, one group, one community, whatever that is, to perform with the skill set that you've got and the ambition that you have, who would that be? Or is it as much as with the Succeed project, you want that to be everyone?
Now, of course, it's always everyone, but everyone is not willing to pay for everything. No, but I think it's really about taking organizations like UNICEF, which are working on the biggest problems we have on Earth, and looking into how can I support them in with what I can deliver in a better way.
Right.
Because every organization struggles with similar things. It can be a public company, it can be a small company, it can be a big company. There are a lot of patterns because I've worked with so many companies over the last 24 years, plus 24. There are a lot of patterns which are the same. And specifically, when you talk about my human innovation angle, which I always bring in, there's a lot about leadership, a lot about empowerment structure, which you need to build up in organization to truly innovate.
Yeah.
And not focusing like some do only on the processes. And that's like UNICEF would be an interesting one. Really the big ones. Even something which might be counterintuitive like Facebook.
Okay. Yeah.
Whereas how can we help Facebook in a different way? Most probably I will learn a lot as well. That's helpful, but it's really even worse if you take the dinosaurs like companies. I'm grown up in the real estate industry. This is one of the slowest and successful industries in the world. They're still building stone on stone and renting out space, which was the business model, I don't know, a couple of 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So how to reinvent this industry, that would be a fascinating problem I would love to solve if there's an organization out there.
Great. And flipping that on its head a little bit. So who would you like to learn from? Who do you think, if you was to be able to sit down, have a coffee or a beer with somebody and learn from them in order to help your own performance, who would your ideal person or group of people be in that space?
Beer will not work with that person. I have two. One is the Dalai Lama,
Right.
because he is a leader, a true leader. He's basically not paying anyone to follow him.
Right.
So I would be fascinating picking his brain and seeing how he thinks about leadership, if he sees himself as a leader or not, and all these kind of questions.
Yeah.
So that's definitely, and then of course, like people like Elon Musk, who are on the other spectrum of leadership, really interesting leaders, changing a lot of things in this world. Huge innovator. I really like what he's doing in this world. Not everything what he's doing on social media, but that's not my piece of cake to discuss or even to decide or judge. But it's really what he's doing for the whole world is super fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, love you. And the whole connection of the innovation space. I mean, it's all the conversations that I've had with you and the groups that you've put me in contact with have all been about how can you think about these things differently.
Yeah.
And it's everything from the small day-to-day sort of aspect all the way through to, as you say, these massive worldwide issues that if we can just think about performing in a different way,
yeah,
and leading in a different way, all those great things, I'm sure that the whole performance could be lifted. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. And so how can people reach out to you? Where can people find you, and where can they find out more?
Of course, you will find me everywhere on all social medias, basically with my name. It's just Jens Heitland everywhere.
Yeah.
Google me, you will find me. There's almost no one else visible anymore. Then my main website is jensheitland.com.
Right.
If you're interested to figure out about the new startup, it's wearesucceed.com.
Okay.
Just as you write it, wearesucceed.com, where we share what's going on, how we will figure out to solve the challenge of generating or creating leadership education for everyone in the whole world.
And of course, we'll put all these links in the show notes so everybody has a chance to reach out. And I know you're active on LinkedIn, you're active on all the other socials as well, aren't you? So as you say, easy to find. As long as you've got that Jens Heitland name, you know where to get you.
Exactly.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, as always, Jens, a fantastic conversation. And I think the ambition of the Succeed startup to help literally everyone perform by focusing on that leadership and leadership development and lifting the bar for everybody on that game. It's a wonderful topic, and I'm sure we'll have further conversations along the line as to if I can help at all, if I can put you in contact with anybody else. So if anybody is interested, you'll see the links get in touch. I'm sure Jens would be more than happy to have those discussions with you. So Jens, an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time today, and I hope to speak to you soon.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, then please give the podcast a rate, review, and share. I'm Paul Teasdale, and from sausage making to banking, oil and gas to Formula One, I help people perform. If you'd like to find out more and have a conversation, contact me via helpingpeopleperform.com.